This year, part of the family celebrates its 50th birthday. I say the family, not my family, because it's part of everyone's family. See, if there's one thing that we've learned over this whole 50 years of golf series, it's that the Volkswagen Golf has become a member of the family all over the world. Whether it's a fancy palace in London with a GTI, a bog standard diesel in Ireland, or a new model that should have been retired 30 years beforehand in South Africa, people the world over have a story with the Golf. Just like a Golf. Transcending all class and snobbery, the world has a lot to thank this little beauty for. As our finale of our 50 years of golf celebrations, let's take Lara here on a little drive through her family tree. To paraphrase the great philosopher Dr. Nelly Furtado, flames to dust, lovers to friends, all good things come to an end. The original Beetle was Volkswagen's most important vehicle. It's why the company existed after all, but eventually the mainstay of the company was going to have to retire. While Volkswagen may have technically replaced the then aging Beetle in 1974, Volkswagen actually wanted to get rid of that thing way back in the 50s. But the problem was, people kept bloody buying them, but that meant they had plenty of time to get it right. Volkswagen tried everything, including swoopy front-engined air-cooled hatchbacks, and some of these designs would even go on to form the basis of some of Volkswagen's other models, like the gorgeous Type 3. There was also the Volkswagen K70, but that was little more than a rebadged NSU, but it was technically Volkswagen's first foray into the front-engined water-cooled territory. But the problem was, it was a size above the Golf and, well, most importantly, nobody bought it. After many interesting attempts, the designer Jethro Bronner penned the Mark I Golf as we know and love it today. He would go on to say it was one of the most important designs of his career, and I'm sure Volkswagen would be inclined to agree. Remember, this was a man that, alongside standard hatchbacks, designed some of the most staggering cars in history, so that's no small accolade. And in 1974, 50 years ago this year, we got the Mark I Golf that we know and love today. And what a revolution for Volkswagen that was.
I grew up around VWs. In fact, my mum passed her driving test while heavily pregnant with me in a beautiful 1957 oval window Beetle. As kids, we absolutely loved that car. It was just so cute. But then one day, my dad gave it away to someone who said they'd give it a better home, which is still traumatic for me. But anyhow, that car was replaced by a brand new Mark I Golf. And that car was a real revelation to us. I remember going to the dealership in Southsea on the south coast of England, about 40 minutes from home, and we were allowed to ride in the back of the car the whole way home. And when I say the back, I mean a hatchback was a really new thing for us, and it was amazing that you could take the parcel shelf out, so we rode in the crumple zone, waving to all the cars behind. Anyhow, that car was a silver, quite basic spec car, but if you imagine it, and amongst everything else that was on our street at the time, it looked so crisp, so clean. You know, imagine Austin Maxis and Allegros and Ambassadors everywhere. And here was this car designed by Jethro Bronner, who'd given us the Lotus Esprit amongst so many other wonders. So my parents, a few years later, upgraded that from Mars Red GTI, which was extremely exciting for us. And they went on to become real fans of Golfs, always getting a new GTI every few years. And they're quite elderly now, but they still roll around in a Mark VII Golf they bought brand new 9 years ago.
Celebrating 40 years in Ireland this year, the Mark II was more evolution than revolution. It took everything from the Mark I and added more options, more technology, by 80 standards at least, more fast. While not a million miles away from the Mark I to live with, the subtle but important advances in comfort and drivability mean that the Mark II is still a popular sight the world over today. The Mark II was a message to the world that there wouldn't be a repeat of the Beetle. VW were going to develop and shape the Golf with the times, not try to keep selling a living acronym.
The 90s were the bar of soap era, as car makers began to discover this thing called aerodynamics. They began to become more rounded. The Mark III was no exception. The Mark III, though, was a massive leap forward in refinement, quieter, sturdier and comfier. It also brought two of the most magical engines Volkswagen has ever produced, the VR6 and the TDI. With a plethora of special models from multicoloured Harlequins to Pink Floyd editions and available in oh-so-90s colours like teal and mustard yellow, the Mark III will always be known as the fun Golf.
As the 90s came to a close, things got much more serious, and the Golf decided to have both a glow-up and a grow-up too. Chiseling the edges of the Mark III, the Mark IV set new standards for build quality, ushering in a time where it was rare to see a VAG product that wasn't fit for 250k plus miles. It was the little things as well. Blue backlit gauges to be easier on the eyes at night, finally a decent set of cup holders, not to mention the running gear. The new PD engine redefined the word bulletproof. Speaking of running gear, the GTI had a new sporty stablemate. The Mark IV brought us the R series with the R32, for those who felt the GTI just wasn't enough.
Now, I know that I may have been a bit harsh on the Mark V when we did our OVV on it, but if anything, the people's reaction shows how even these Golfs, from the bottom of the automotive depreciation curve, can still evoke emotion from people. The Mark V came along with an all-new platform, designed to make the Golf into a more premium product like we know today. That makes sense. The Mark V stems from the beginning of VW designing cars for the upmarket and trickling that down to lower spec models, not the other way around as you'd expect. If only they'd put the same effort into rust-proofing the wings. And of course, this was the regeneration of the GTI, tartan and all. You can likely thank the Mark V for the GTI still being around today. Volkswagen invested a lot into the new platform, which is likely why they based the Mark VI almost entirely off of it.
Yep, the Mark VI was definitely a case of playing it safe, which was definitely the sensible call to make. Based on, but subtly improving on the Mark V in every department, the Mark VI ushered us into the 2010s with a sense of familiarity, making what we already loved even better, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. There is, of course, the elephant in the room regarding one of their diesel engines causing a worldwide scandal, but we're past that now. Sadly, that particular scandal means you don't see many Mark VIs on the road anymore, but that's certainly not due to dwindling quality.
Playing it safe at the Mark VI was so that they could get the money together to develop a new, more diverse platform, and give us one of the best Golfs we had ever seen, the Mark VII. Kicking things up a notch, the Mark VII was built to show the world that the Golf is a premium product at affordable prices. A new level of refinement and build quality combined with an exterior that still looks new today, the Mark VII has set the new standard for what a car should be. Every run-of-the-mill car going forward has got this as the benchmark, and that's no easy task. Which brings us nicely to today, with the Mark 8. At first, the Mark 8 was a bit of a radical departure from the Mark 7, maybe trying to go a wee bit too far into the future with touch-sensitive everything before we were actually ready for it. Before we asked for it. But Volkswagen listened and owned up to their mistake, and with the later models, changed all your touch-sensitive stuff back to good old-fashioned buttons, as it should be. And now, the Mark 8 is universally loved. It's chiseled the edges of the styling a bit, but it's still very distinctly related to those before it. Original button issues aside though, the Mark 8 now carries the torch for the Volkswagen Golf, with the same build quality, refinement and reliability they've always had, and it won't be long before we're looking back at this one with the same adoration that we have for the others. I know we may be a classic channel, but just remember, at one point in time, your Mark II Golf people were scoffing at because it wasn't a Mark I. And they'll be looking at the Mark 8 the same way you think about yours. Just remember, what once was traffic is now someone's passion. If Volkswagen's track record is anything to go by, the Mark 8 is roughly halfway through its lifespan. Now, I'm looking forward to the Mark 9, but with the way things are going, it might just be an ID future.
And while the Golf may be more than just a Golf to people like you or I who are into our Volkswagens, you also have to remember that quite literally the Golf was more than just a Golf. The humble Golf laid the foundation for so many stablemates. You see, while the Golf may have also been the Golf convertible, the Golf variants, the Golf Plus, the Golf also became many other things that weren't called Golfs. For example, the Scirocco and its successor, the Corrado, which was its successor, then predecessor, and maybe someday successor again, who knows. Also introduced in 1974, the Scirocco shared its underpinnings with the Golf, but was actually released a few months earlier to double check that everything was going to be okay for the mass-produced Golfs. You see, the Scirocco being a low-volume, sporty model meant that they'd have a smaller customer base to iron out any issues, which makes a lot more sense than just throwing your main volume seller out there and hoping it sticks. Which is kind of what Microsoft has been doing for the last wee while with Flight Simulator and Forza Motorsport, but we'll not get into that. But while the Scirocco was basically a Golf underneath, up top basically every single component was a different story. Same goes for the Mark II Scirocco, Mark I Golf underneath, and just as loved. The Corrado was the 90s take on the Scirocco, and it was a weird mix and match of Mark II and Mark III, but for all intents and purposes, still a Golf. It's like a Golf in a tracksuit. And when the Scirocco came back for a third generation in the late 2000s, it too was still a Golf. A very pretty Golf. And it wasn't just sporty Volkswagens that the Golf were used for either. Oh no. Remember, Volkswagen isn't just Volkswagen. Volkswagen is Audi, it's Seat, it's Skoda, it's so much more. Now, Volkswagen have never been shy of platform sharing. I mean, the original Beetle is a prime example of that, with the bay window, the notchback, and all the rest. The Golf is a Beetle. It's a Skoda Yeti. Give it a boot, it's a Jetta, it's a Seat Toledo. There's a Golf for literally everybody out there, and it might even be called a Golf. My story with the Volkswagen Golf begins with this one, my first car. Affectionately named Lara after my favourite video game character, Lara Croft, when I was a kid. I can owe basically everything I am today to this. Okay, well, actually it starts even further back, to when I was an actual kid. I remember very vividly leaving school early one day. My parents were still in work, so my brother Anthony was asked to lift me from school, and he was driving a bright red, 3-door Mark II Golf driver with a 4-light grille. At least I think it was a driver. It may have been a 1.3, who knows, he had 2. This is a photo he has of that very car in his fireplace today, so you never know, maybe it still means something to him too. He took me around town in it, and for whatever reason that kinda just stuck with me. But anyway, on to the future, on to today. Well, then. I got this when I was just 15 years old, when it was listed on the local classifieds. Done deal to you average folk. I had convinced my parents to give me a lend of the money. I hadn't told them that my plan to pay them back was to save all of the dinner money they were giving me and spend it on it and car parts. I don't think they've ever known. This might be how you find out, Manda. Sorry. And by the time I had them persuaded, the ad sadly was taken down. Naturally, I was very upset, but just 2 days later, it was relisted. Thank God for time wasters, eh? So we got up early one Sunday morning and I dragged my parents all the way from County Armagh to Buncrana, County Donegal, which is there. And unfortunately, when we got there, things weren't as they seemed. Because it turns out, the pictures that the ad used were from Google. Now, there was still a Mark II Golf GTI sitting in front of me, but naturally I was not very impressed. £580 later, you couldn't even buy a shell for that today, we got it home, having to stop every 20 miles to top up the coolant because the coolant pipe was leaking water. In fact, I still have the very jerry can from that trip that we kept topping up, with Lara just about still legible on it. And then we later discovered when we got it home that it had the wrong number plate on it, but we'll not get into that. It was all fine in the end. But what this was to me is what anyone's first car is. Freedom. Granted, I wasn't old enough to drive it, but still.
But for the first time, I wasn't worried about anything else. I mean, you know what it's like being a teenager. Social anxiety, social pressures, emotions, they're all over the place. But for the first time, I didn't care about any of that anymore. Because I had a car. I didn't just have a car. I had a GTI.
I remember doodling pictures of Plymouth Superbirds and Mark II Golfs in my school books, and being told by my maths teacher at the time that if I didn't work harder, I'd never have one of them. Now, imagine the look on her face when I rocked up in this one. Still waiting on the Superbird though. This, to me, was an escape. Coming home from school, working on it with my dad outside because we didn't have a shed at the time, learning about how cars actually work, having friends come over and help, posting it all over Facebook and at the time Tumblr, if you can remember that one. It got to the stage where everyone knew about my GTI. It got to the stage where people knew my car more than they actually knew me. And I'm actually kind of pretty okay with that. And I gained so much self-confidence too. I mean, no longer did I think of myself as the weird, long-haired metalhead that nobody wanted to talk to. Because it just wasn't really true. And no longer was I afraid to be in front of the camera either, because almost no photos of me exist when I was younger, except for whenever I got this, because I wanted to have photos to remember this by. I had just no idea, though, how much the Mark II Golf would come to mean to me. As more and more of them came and went, like I've literally actually lost count of how many of these I've had now since that fateful day in Grunert, my life began to revolve around these amazing cars. See, the thing is, that's just my story. With over 50 years of the Golf and millions of them sold, there are countless lifetimes of stories to be told. The thing is, to be a car of the people, it has to be a car for the people. And with countless models, trim levels, and even countries keeping old models going just to keep people mobile, there's a Golf out there for literally everyone, whether that's brand new or keeping a classic alive. First cars, last cars, forever cars, first date cars, arguments cars, last day cars, hospital visit cars, school run cars, track cars, rally cars, race cars, driving slightly too fast into corners cars, smashing the sump on a bump cars, you name it. Fact of the matter is, the Golf has either been there or been there for you when you did it. Truth is, everybody has the story of the Golf, whether that's a Mark II or Mark III, 4 or 5. When they see one on the street, they want to talk about it. It brings a smile to their face. Volkswagens are known for their massive communities. I mean, clues in the name, people's car. Long after they finish their life of A to B reliable transport, they're still bringing people together, albeit maybe for different reasons. No other brand out there has a following like Volkswagen. There's no other community that transcends race, politics, religion. If you've got a Golf, we're friends now. I can't even begin to tell you how many genuine, proper, lifelong friends that I've made over the years, all for buying that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd have loved to have got every generation of Golf in here in a big row from 1 to 8, talk about all the differences, drive them all, but that's not what this is about. This is about my Golf. And I say my Golf, your Golf, the royal your, the people's Golf. Picture this was your Golf. You'd be feeling the same emotions too. When Volkswagen cancelled the Beetle, the world mourned. A culturally significant icon that survived decades was gone. Now, I'd love to say that the same's not going to happen to the Golf, but I mean, nobody thought it would happen to the Beetle. So I guess all we can do now is to love and cherish our Golfs as much as we can, while we can. I, for one, get to love and cherish this thing the whole way home with the people who helped me build it in the first place. So thanks, Volkswagen. Thanks for making me who I am today, and for keeping the world mobile.
share.